What would you say to somebody who's coming across your work for the first time?
Mouth breathing is a disaster for your health. 11 years ago, when all of my respiratory problems that I had quite a few, suddenly went away once I learned how to breathe properly.
How much truth actually is there in mewing, and is it just something that silly, insecure teenagers do?
It is not important for young kids to mew. It's important for young kids to have proper oral posture. These are two completely different things. You will never resolve anxiety unless you get control of your breathing. When you're constantly over-breathing, you're sending your brain signals that you are stressed out, and then your brain reacts by having you breathe too much. Learning how to breathe deep and slowly through your nose can really transform your health.
You know, I used to personally be a mouth breather. I don't know if the word mouth breather, in fact, has actually got this nowadays. I don't know how long it's been around, but there's this very strong negative connotation. And in fact, it's used as an insult as well. But anyway, I used to breathe through my mouth. And the reason was that I had a deviated septum. So I struggled a lot to breathe through one of my nostrils. And so I got a septoplasty. And since then, I've been able to breathe through my nose a lot better. And the thing is, deviated septum is very common among the general population, but a lot of people can't afford an operation or might not have the resources there or not the insurance. So my question is what you would recommend for people who can't breathe properly due to like physical restrictions, such as a deviated septum.
Yeah. So, you know, you've got up to 50% of the population that breathes through their mouth, at least on occasion. And you've probably got 100 different problems that these people are suffering from. So you can't offer a blanket prescription for everyone. Some people have a septum that's clearly deviated. Other people have turbinate problems. Other people have chronic congestion from allergies or some autoimmune response. I mean, this list goes on and on and on. So what you can do, if you do have the time and interest, and I hope you do, is to figure out your core issue behind why you can't breathe in and out of your nose. About 30% of the population has something called nasal valve collapse, where the flesh around their nostrils is either too thin, so when they inhale, it flutters, or their nostrils themselves aren't big enough. So it's just much easier for them to breathe in and out of the mouth. But there's so many reasons why people do this. And you have to take your own self-responsibility and figure out where the issue is, and then figure out how to clear it up.
And you talk at the beginning of the book as well about how it can affect jaw structure as well, because you're constantly having your jaw hang down, you're breathing through your mouth, it can cause teeth issues. Now, a solution which has been memeified on the internet and treated as something almost silly, insecure teenagers do for the sake of aesthetics is mewing. How much truth is there in mewing? I know you mentioned it in your book, but we want to hear it firsthand. How much truth actually is there in mewing? And is it just something that silly, insecure teenagers do?
Yeah, I interviewed Mike Mew and John Mew before they were cool superstars.
Wow.
Very interesting. I was there early on. Very interesting dudes. So here's what we do know, and I can tell you what we don't know, but what is probably true. Why do we have crooked teeth? Okay, why do we have crooked teeth? Because our mouths are too small. That's why. So you're going to hear all these different reasons, and they're all wrong. You have crooked teeth because when your mouth is too small, your teeth have nowhere else to grow, so they grow in crooked, period. So some people think that mewing, which is this technique of using your tongue to push to the roof of your mouth, can help expand your mouth. And by expanding your mouth, it can help tone and open up the airway. We know that that is certainly true for young people. So one of the reasons why young kids end up having mouths big enough and their teeth growing straight, as all of our ancestors had, is they had proper oral posture. And there is this whole new field called myofunctional therapy that is teaching kids proper oral posture because we've completely forgotten about it. So when you swallow, your tongue should be at the roof of your mouth, not pushing against your teeth. Go look at a bunch of kids now and watch them eating. Almost all of them are pushing their tongue against their teeth and throwing them out of alignment. So there have not been any randomized controlled trials of mewing. There never will be. But on principle, it makes sense to me. How's that for an unsatisfactory answer? Yeah.
Well, it's better to have the nuance than to not have it. So I'm glad that you clarified. I've heard that it's definitely important in young kids to mew. So I guess the fact that this is something which is catching a craze in teenagers is maybe a good thing.
Let's talk
another
about
craze.
that for 1 second for young kids to mew. It is not important for young kids to mew. It's important for young kids to have proper oral posture. These are two completely different things. And the reason why all of our ancestors, all of them, had perfectly straight teeth, if you go back 1,000 years and older than that, is because they had proper oral posture. They knew how to chew, and they were chewing all the time. They knew where to place their tongue.
Yeah, but it really is quite interesting because it has become such a craze. I mean, especially for younger people who are on the internet, they might see like it is quite crazy. There's this whole culture around it where, if your jaw is backwards, then it has almost negative social connotations. It's really related to like levels of attractiveness, and it's really then becomes part of this meme culture where you see people like pointing at their jawlines because they mew, and it's quite hilarious actually.
I wish I was on TikTok. I've never been on it. I've heard these stories that a lot of people are into this, and what? Let's look at the positive side of this. Is having your tongue in the proper position helps open up your airway. Exercising your tongue in your mouth helps tone the airway, allows you to breathe better. Is it allowing you to push your face forward as these kids want? I don't know. I think that it wouldn't be that hard to conduct an experiment in which you just scanned people's heads, right? And then 6 months later, looked at if there had been any movement or any bone growth in their head, or looked at their airways. But again, people prefer to go online and tell their own personal story than to actually take the time to collect real data.
You said mewing is not important, the oral posture is important. And part of what you mentioned there is the chewing. So could you just unpack that for our listeners as well a little bit, maybe how that can be important to keeping the right face structure to open up the airways and so on?
Sure. So if you look at ancient skulls, and I've looked at hundreds and hundreds of these things, you notice that from all over the world, they all had not only straight teeth, but these very prognathic faces, wide jaws. Their faces grew outwards. And 90% of us have a jaw and a face that is growing the other way. It's flat and it's growing the other way. So the next thing you have to do is ask yourself, well, how did this happen? Right? This wasn't random. Something happened. And it turned out that as we started processing foods more and more and more, especially in the industrial age, these foods became very soft. And we no longer were chewing. And if we weren't chewing for up to a couple hours a day, which is what our ancestors were doing, we would not develop the proper musculature and skeleture. So that's why we have mouths that are too small for our faces and crooked teeth. So if you look at the flip side of that, well, if you do chew like our ancestors did, then you would develop this wider mouth and this bigger airway, which is true. So chewing is especially important for young kids, not to eat applesauce and Gerbers and, candy and cake. All that stuff's fine on occasion, but it's to eat real food, food that requires you to chew. And when you're chewing, to have that proper oral posture, pushing that tongue to the roof of your mouth every time you.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the clip from that episode. If you'd like to check out the full interview with James Nestor, you can click right here. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave your comments below.